During a long-awaited family dinner with my son and his wife, I thought we had finally reconciled after years of painful silence. For the first time in so long, I felt like a father again. But then my phone buzzed with a chilling message. From an unknown number, "Stand up, leave now. Don't say a word to your son." My heart sank. I obeyed the warning, and what I discovered shattered me, more than the years of distance ever had. Just 30 minutes later, the police were knocking on their door, but what I learned that night still haunts me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is and where you are listening now. The dish soap bubbles clung to my weathered hands as I scrubbed Margaret's favorite coffee mug for the third time this week. Same routine every evening. Washed the single plate, single fork, single cup that marked another solitary dinner. The kitchen felt cavernous without her humming while she cooked, without her gentle scolding, about leaving newspapers scattered across the table. I dried the mug carefully and placed it in the dish rack where it always sat. Like a shrine to better times, the refrigerator hummed its lonely tune, decorated with faded photos held by mismatched magnets. My eyes found the picture of Rick at his high school graduation, 17 years old, grinning in his cap and gown, Margaret's arm wrapped around his shoulders. Before the arguments, before the money, before the silence, the phone's shrill ring cut through my reverie like a knife. My wet hands fumbled for the dish towel as the phone continued its insistent demand. The wall-mounted receiver felt cold against my palm. As I lifted it, squinting at the caller ID through my reading glasses, the number made my breath catch. Rick. For a moment, I couldn't move. A year of silence stretched between us like an ocean. The last time we'd spoken, he'd stormed out after I'd refused to loan him money for his investment opportunity. Margaret would have handled it better. She always knew the right words. "Hello." My voice came out rougher than intended. "Dad." Rick's voice carried that same uncertain tone from his childhood when he'd broken something valuable and wasn't sure how much trouble he was in. It's me." I gripped the phone tighter, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Rick, I wasn't expecting." I know it's been." He paused, and I could hear him breathing. "Too long, way too long." I moved slowly to my armchair, the one Margaret had insisted we buy, because it supported my back properly. The leather was worn smooth, from years of evening news and Sunday crosswords. "How are you, son?" "I'm good, really good. Emma and we've been talking, and we realized how much we miss having you around." "How much we miss?" "Family." The word hung in the air between us. Family. Something we'd been once before. Pride and money and stubborn silence built walls between us. "I miss it too," I admitted, surprised by the honesty in my own voice. "Dad, would you consider coming for dinner tonight? Emma's making that pot roast you always loved, and we could talk. Really talk like we used to." I stared at the family photo on my side table. Rick, Emma, Margaret, and me at their wedding, 5 years ago before everything went wrong. Margaret always said, "Families find their way back to each other given time." Tonight, my voice betrayed my surprise. "I know it's short notice, but Emma's already started cooking, and we don't want to wait anymore. We've wasted enough time." Something in his voice tugged at my heart. A vulnerability I remembered from when he was small and afraid of thunderstorms. Maybe Margaret had been right. Maybe families really could heal. "What time?" I heard myself saying. 7:30. I'll text you the address. We moved to Montclair last year. Montclair. Expensive territory. But then Rick had always been ambitious. "I'll be there, Dad." His voice softened. "Thank you for giving us another chance." After I hung up, I sat in the gathering desk, holding the family photo in my trembling hands. Margaret smiled up at me from the frame, and I could almost hear her whisper, "It's time, Jonathan, it's time to come home." The silence that followed the dial tone felt different somehow, charged with possibility instead of emptiness. I set the family photo carefully back on the side table and rose from my chair with a purpose I hadn't felt in months. Tonight would be different. Tonight I'd have my son back. Upstairs, my bedroom felt like a museum of memories. Margaret's perfume bottles still lined her dresser, dust motes dancing in the late afternoon light. Streaming through lace curtains, I opened my closet and pushed past everyday shirts and worn sweaters until my fingers found the navy suit, hanging in protective plastic. The fabric felt substantial between my fingers, wool blend that Margaret had insisted on when she'd surprised me with it for Rick's graduation. "You need something nice for important occasions," she'd said, smoothing the lapels with her careful hands. "And our son graduating is definitely important." I carried the suit to the bed and unwrapped it slowly, remembering how proud I'd felt. Walking into that auditorium, Margaret on my arm, watching Rick cross the stage. The same suit had seen me through job interviews, anniversaries, and Margaret's funeral. Tonight, it would witness another milestone. The shower's hot water loosened muscles. I didn't realize I'd been tensing. As I shaved, I caught my reflection, studying me with hopeful eyes. When had I gotten so old? The lines around my eyes had deepened, and silver now dominated my temples. Would Rick notice? Would Emma see how lonely I'd become? Margaret's cologne sat on the bathroom counter, where I'd left it after her passing. Chanel No. 5, her Christmas gift to herself every year. I touched the bottle briefly, then reached for my own aftershave. Some memories were too precious to borrow from. Dressed and ready, I surveyed my reflection one final time. The suit still fit well, though perhaps a bit looser than before. I selected a bottle of aged whiskey from the cabinet, a peace offering, something to bridge the gap between past hurts and future hopes. My phone buzzed with Rick's text. 247 Elmwood Drive, Montclair. Can't wait to see you, Dad. I called for an Uber, my fingers hesitating over the keyboard as I typed the address. Montclair was 40 minutes away, another world from my modest Brooklyn neighborhood. The app showed a wait time of 8 minutes. Standing by my front window, I watched familiar brownstones blur into evening shadows. Mrs. Chen from next door waved from her stoop, and I waved back, feeling lighter than I had in months. Maybe tonight would change everything. Maybe family really could find its way home. The Uber arrived precisely on time, a clean sedan with a friendly driver, who commented on the nice weather. As we pulled away from the curb as Brooklyn gave way to highways, and highways gave way to manicured suburbs, I watched the world transform outside my window. Houses grew larger, lawns more pristine, driveways wider. By the time we crossed into New Jersey, I was staring at mansions that could have housed 6 families like mine. Montclair's a beautiful area, the driver remarked, noting my wide-eyed observation. Lot of successful folks out here. I'm visiting my son, I replied, pride swelling in my chest. Despite my confusion about how Rick could afford such luxury. Lucky man having family in a place like this. Lucky indeed, I thought, though unease crept into my excitement. How exactly had Rick managed to buy a house in one of New Jersey's most expensive zip codes? The Uber slowed to a stop before a house that belonged in architectural magazines. I sat frozen in the back seat, staring up at stone columns and perfectly manicured topiaries that probably cost more than my monthly rent. A circular driveway curved around an ornate fountain, where water danced in the early evening light. 2 luxury cars, a Mercedes and a BMW, sat parked like gleaming statements of success. "This is it, sir," the driver announced cheerfully. Beautiful place. I fumbled with my wallet, hands trembling slightly as I counted out bills, and added a generous tip. "Thank you. Have a good evening." The car door felt heavier than it should have as I stepped onto pristine pavement. My shoes, polished but obviously worn, clicked against stone as I walked the curved path toward an entrance that could have belonged to a small hotel. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined the walkway, and motion sensor lights illuminated my approach with theatrical precision. Before I could even reach for the brass doorbell, the massive oak door swung open. A middle-aged Hispanic woman with kind eyes and graying hair stood in the doorway, wearing a crisp black dress that screamed professional housekeeper. Her smile seemed genuine, but something flickered behind her eyes. Concern, warning. The expression vanished so quickly, I wondered if I'd imagined it. "Mr. Miller," she said warmly, stepping aside to usher me into a foyer that made my entire living room look like a closet. "I'm Maria. Mr. Rick and Miss Emma are so excited you're here." The interior took my breath away. Marble floors stretched toward a curved staircase that belonged in movies about rich people. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over oil paintings that looked original and expensive. Fresh flowers, real ones, not the artificial arrangements I favored, filled the air with subtle perfume. "Dad," Rick's voice boomed from somewhere deeper in the house, footsteps echoing as he approached. He appeared in the foyer, looking like a magazine model. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, teeth that definitely hadn't been that white at his graduation. When he reached me, his embrace felt desperate, lasting a beat too long. "You look great," he said, stepping back to study me, with eyes that seemed both grateful and anxious. "Really great." Emma materialized beside him, like a graceful apparition in a silk dress that probably cost more than my car. Her makeup was flawless, her jewelry subtle but clearly expensive. Her smile so perfect it felt rehearsed. "Jonathan." She swept forward to kiss my cheek, enveloping me in expensive perfume. "You look wonderful. We're so happy you're here." I managed a smile, still overwhelmed by the sheer opulence surrounding us. "This place is incredible. How do you—" "Real estate?" Rick interrupted quickly, his laugh a little too bright. Caught the market at exactly the right time. Lucky timing, mostly. Something about his tone made me pause, but Emma was already taking my arm, with practiced grace. "Come, let's get you settled. Maria, could you take Mr. Miller's coat?" I handed over my jacket, my best one, though it suddenly felt shabby in these surroundings. Maria accepted it with another of those kind but troubled smiles, disappearing toward what I assumed was a coat closet large enough to house a small family. I brought this, I said, offering the whiskey bottle I'd selected so carefully. Thought we could share a drink. Rick's face lit up as he examined the label. Dad, this is fantastic. You shouldn't have, but I'm glad you did. He clapped my shoulder with enthusiasm. That felt slightly forced. Emma's been cooking all afternoon. She remembered how much you love pot roast. How did Emma remember my food preferences? We'd shared perhaps 3 meals together in 5 years, and I couldn't recall pot roast being a topic of conversation. But her smile was so warm, so welcoming, that I pushed the thought aside. You're too kind, I told her, meaning it, despite my confusion. Family takes care of family, she replied smoothly, linking her arm through mine. That's what matters most. Rick led us toward what I assumed was the dining room, his stride confident, but something tight around his eyes. Maria had vanished somewhere into the house's depths, leaving us in this perfect tableau of family reunion. As we walked through rooms that belonged in decorating magazines, I tried to reconcile this obvious wealth with the son who'd asked me for money. Just a year ago, the dining room opened before us, like something from a period drama. Mahogany table set for 4, with china that caught the light from an overhead chandelier. Silver gleamed against white linen, and the scent of cooking pot roast drifted from somewhere beyond swinging doors. That probably led to a kitchen larger than my apartment. This is beautiful, I breathed, genuinely awed. Emma beamed at the compliment. We want tonight to be special. We want to start over, Jonathan. All of us, as Rick pulled out my chair, with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to formal dining. I found myself hoping Margaret could see this moment. Her boy had made something of himself, found success beyond our modest dreams. Maybe she'd be proud of how he'd turned out. Maybe she'd approve of this chance at reconciliation I was about to take. The dining room welcomed us, like a scene from a lifestyle magazine. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier's warm light, casting tiny rainbows across starched white linens. Silver gleamed against bone china that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Each place setting looked like artwork. Multiple forks arranged with military precision. Cloth napkins folded into perfect peaks. This is incredible, I breathed, running my fingers along the mahogany table's polished edge. Rick beamed as he pulled out my chair at the head of the table. Only the best for family reunions, right, Dad? Emma settled gracefully to my left, while Rick claimed the seat to my right. The arrangement felt deliberate, both of them positioned where they could watch my every reaction, guide every conversation. Maria appeared silently from what I assumed was the kitchen, carrying delicate appetizers arranged like tiny sculptures. Let's start with your whiskey, Rick announced, already opening the bottle I brought. The amber liquid caught the light as he poured generous portions into heavy crystal tumblers. This calls for a proper toast. He handed me a glass filled higher than I would have poured for myself. The whiskey's warmth spread through my chest as Emma raised her wineglass with theatrical grace. To family, she said, her smile radiant. To forgiveness and fresh starts. To Margaret, Rick added, his voice catching slightly. She would have wanted us together like this. The whiskey burned sweetly as we drank. Margaret always said alcohol loosened tongues and hearts in equal measure. Tonight, surrounded by such obvious prosperity, I found myself wondering what she'd think of this opulent display. Tell us about the restaurants. Emma leaned forward, with genuine seeming interest. Rick says you built an empire from nothing. Empire is too grand a word. I took another sip, feeling unusually relaxed. Just hard work and faith in people. Margaret always said, treat employees like family, customers like friends. Don't be modest, Dad. Rick refilled my glass, before I noticed it had emptied. 7 locations now. That's impressive by any standard. 7. He'd been keeping track, even during our silence. Something warm expanded in my chest. Maybe he'd cared more than I'd realized. Maria served the soup course with practiced efficiency, though I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she placed the bowl before me. Rich lobster bisque in delicate porcelain. Another reminder of how far we'd traveled from my modest Brooklyn kitchen. Do you ever think about retirement? Emma asked casually, cutting her bread with surgical precision. Slowing down a bit? The restaurants keep me busy. It's what Margaret and I built together. I found myself drinking more freely than usual. The combination of good company and fine alcohol, loosening inhibitions I'd maintained for months. Every location has her fingerprints on it. Rick and Emma exchanged a glance. I pretended not to notice. They seemed to communicate without words, like couples do after years together. Emma's hand found mine briefly, her fingers cool against my skin. But you can't work forever, Rick pressed gently. Have you thought about succession planning? Legal arrangements for the future? The question felt oddly specific, But the alcohol made everything seem harmless. "One day at a time, son. One day at a time." Maria appeared with the main course. Pot roast that smelled exactly like Margaret's recipe. How had Emma known? We'd shared so few meals together over the years. "This is perfect," I told her truthfully. "Exactly like my wife used to make." Emma's smile looked painted on. "I wanted tonight to be special, to remind you that family takes care of family." As we ate, Rick regaled me with stories about his real estate ventures, though his explanations remained frustratingly vague. Emma asked pointed questions about restaurant operations, profit margins, property values. Their curiosity felt intense, almost professional. The room grew warmer as evening progressed. My head felt lighter than it should have. After just 2 glasses of whiskey, rich food, good company, and the relief of reconciliation, I told myself, nothing more than that. Rick checked his watch. When he thought I wasn't looking, Emma monitored my consumption like a bartender, tracking a regular customer. Maria moved between kitchen and dining room, with nervous efficiency, dropping a fork that clattered against marble floors. Something nagged at the edge of my consciousness, but the whiskey made thinking difficult. Everything felt slightly surreal, like watching myself from outside my body. When had I become such a lightweight? Reaching into my jacket pocket for my phone, the Queen's opening last month. Margaret would have been so proud of how the community welcomed us. My phone vibrated against my palm, just as I started to pull it out. The vibration startled me mid-sentence. "Sorry," I mumbled, glancing apologetically at Rick and Emma. Probably just the night manager, with some routine question. But the number on my screen belonged to no one I recognized. A local area code, but completely foreign digits. I frowned, thumb hovering over the notification. Restaurant emergencies came from familiar numbers. Miguel from the Park Slope location, Sarah from the Crown Heights spot, Tony from our newest Queen's venture. The phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. "Everything all right?" Rick asked, leaning forward with what seemed like excessive concern. "Just unfamiliar number." I shielded the screen partially with my napkin, driven by an instinct I couldn't explain. The text message appeared in stark capital letters. "Stand up and leave. Now. Say nothing to your son." My blood turned cold. The elegant dining room suddenly felt like it was tilting, though I couldn't tell if that was shock or the whiskey making my head swim. I read the message again, certain I'd misunderstood. Same words, same urgent command. "Dad?" Emma's voice seemed to come from far away. "You look pale. Are you feeling all right?" I forced my features into what I hoped resembled normalcy, slipping the phone back into my pocket, with hands that trembled more than they should. "Fine. Just rich food hitting me harder than expected." But I wasn't fine. Someone unknown had my private number, knew where I was, felt compelled to warn me. About what? About Rick? About this perfect evening? That suddenly felt like an elaborate stage production. The whiskey glass in my hand caught the chandelier light, amber liquid swirling as my fingers shook imperceptibly. When had I become this dizzy? 2 glasses shouldn't affect me this strongly. Not with a full meal. "Maybe some water," Emma suggested smoothly, already signaling. "Maria." Rick studied my face with sharp attention. "You sure you're okay? You went completely white there for a second." "I'm sure." The lie came easier than it should have. "Just need to... Excuse me for a moment." "Bathroom." "Of course." Rick pointed toward the hallway. "Second door on the left. We'll wait for you." "Maria's bringing dessert." I stood carefully, testing my balance. The room swayed slightly, but I managed to walk normally toward the hallway. Behind me, Rick and Emma's voices continued in low, concerned tones. The hallway stretched before me, lined with expensive artwork and subtle lighting. Second door on the left led to what I assumed was a powder room, but instead of turning left, something made me continue straight, toward what looked like a kitchen entrance. The anonymous message burned in my memory. Whoever sent it knew something I didn't. Someone felt I was in enough danger to risk exposure by warning a complete stranger. Maria stood at an enormous sink, washing crystal glasses with methodical precision. Her back was turned toward me, but she didn't acknowledge my presence, even though my footsteps must have been audible on the marble floors. She continued her work as if I were invisible. The kitchen's back door stood just beyond her, leading to what looked like a garden. Freedom, fresh air, space to think clearly, away from Rick and Emma's watchful eyes. I moved quietly past Maria, expecting her to turn, to question my presence, to alert my hosts. She never looked up from her washing, though her shoulders tensed slightly as I passed. The door opened silently onto a manicured lawn. That could have belonged to a country club. Motion sensors illuminated my path, across perfectly trimmed grass, toward a gate in the property's back fence. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, carrying its mysterious warning like a ticking bomb. Street lamps beyond the fence promised anonymity, distance from whatever danger, had prompted that urgent message. I walked faster, my dress shoes slipping slightly on dewy grass, not caring about stains or appearances anymore. The gate opened onto a quiet residential street, lined with mansions that probably housed millionaires and their secrets. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers, opened my ride-sharing app, and requested pickup 1 block away from Rick's address. 5 minutes until arrival. 5 minutes to decide whether I was being paranoid or protecting myself from something real. The phone in my hand felt like evidence of conspiracy or paranoia. I couldn't tell which. But that message, those urgent capital letters, had triggered every survival instinct Margaret's practical wisdom had ever taught me. When someone warns you about danger, she'd always said, listen first and ask questions later. The Uber's headlights appeared at the end of the block, cutting through suburban darkness like a lifeline. I climbed into the back seat, gave the driver my Brooklyn address, and immediately dialed the number. That had shattered my evening. It rang twice before a voice answered. Careful, anonymous, deliberately neutral. I hoped you would call this number. Who is this? My voice came out rougher than intended. Why did you warn me? I cannot reveal myself. But you were in immediate danger tonight. That's impossible. I was having dinner with my son. A pause that stretched too long. Then, your son owes $2.3 million to people who break bones when payment is late. The Uber driver glanced in his rearview mirror. As we merged into traffic, probably wondering why his passenger had gone completely silent mid-conversation, I gripped the phone tighter, the anonymous voice's words echoing in my head like hammer blows. That's impossible, I repeated, though my voice lacked conviction. Rick owns real estate. He lives in a mansion, borrowed against everything to fund gambling debts. Underground casinos, high-stakes poker, sports betting with organized loan sharks. The voice remained calm, methodical. 2 weeks to pay or face serious physical consequences. My free hand found the door handle instinctively, as if I could escape this information by fleeing the moving car. Through the window, expensive Montclair neighborhoods blurred past, perfect lawns hiding imperfect secrets. Even if that were true, I said slowly, what does it have to do with warning me away from dinner? The whiskey you brought contains zetrolum. It multiplies alcohol effects by a factor of 5, making you extremely susceptible to suggestion. The words hit like a physical blow. The unusual dizziness, the way 2 glasses, had affected me like 6. My increasing willingness to discuss business details I'd normally keep private. I stopped, remembering Rick's eager insistence on opening my gift immediately. Emma's careful monitoring of my consumption, their coordinated refilling of my glass before I'd noticed it emptying. Legal documents were prepared in advance. The voice continued relentlessly. Complete transfer of your restaurant properties and business assets. Power of attorney granting your son full control. The only missing element was your signature. The Uber driver kept his eyes on the road, professionally ignoring his passenger's obvious distress. I stared out at suburban streets that looked suddenly sinister. Every well-lit window potentially concealing similar betrayals. How do you know all this? That doesn't matter. What matters is that you escaped before signing anything. Zetrulum combined with alcohol can cause memory gaps, making it easy to claim you willingly transferred everything. I thought about Rick's nervous energy, Emma's rehearsed warmth, their pointed questions about succession planning and retirement. The evening replayed in my memory, with horrifying new context. Every toast, every refilled glass, every strategic touch designed to lower my guard. My son wouldn't, but the protest died in my throat. The boy who'd once asked me to read him bedtime stories had grown into a man desperate enough to drug his own father. The loan sharks gave him 2 weeks. That deadline is in 11 days. Why are you helping me? I asked finally. Because what they planned was wrong. Because you deserve to know the truth. About people you trust. The anonymous caller knew details no stranger should possess. Debt amounts, drug names, illegal document specifics. Someone with intimate access to Rick and Emma's conspiracy. Who are you really? Someone who sees more than people realize. Someone who couldn't stand by and watch an innocent man be destroyed by family greed. Maria? The realization hit me like lightning. Her nervous efficiency during dinner. The way she'd avoided eye contact. Her deliberate non-reaction when I'd passed through the kitchen. She'd known about the plan and chosen conscience over employment security. Thank you, I said quietly. Don't thank me yet. They'll realize you're gone soon. Rick is desperate enough to try again, possibly with more dangerous methods. The Uber continued toward Brooklyn, each mile increasing the distance. Between me and the sun, I thought I knew. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Rick's number, probably wondering what was taking so long in the bathroom. What should I do? Protect yourself. Change locks. Inform your lawyers. Move financial assets to accounts Rick can't access. He knows your business inside and out. Every vulnerability. every routine. The driver caught my eye in the mirror. We're about halfway to Brooklyn. Sir, you doing all right back there? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Through the phone, I could hear the anonymous caller breathing steadily, waiting for my next question. Will you testify if this goes to court? I can't, but the truth has a way of surfacing when people dig deep enough. 3 more missed calls appeared on my screen. Rick's panic would be growing, as bathroom minutes stretched into an obvious absence. Soon he'd realize I'd fled deliberately, and desperation would make him dangerous. Be very careful, the voice warned. Desperate people make desperate choices. Your son has 11 days to find $2.3 million, or face consequences worse than bankruptcy. The call ended, leaving me alone, with the Uber driver's soft jazz and the weight of complete family destruction. In one evening, I'd gained a son and lost him again. Learned the price of trust and the cost of naivety. My phone buzzed with a text from Rick. Dad, where are you? We're worried sick. I stared at the message, then deleted it without responding. The man who'd sent those words had planned to drug me unconscious and steal everything Margaret and I had built together. The Uber driver cleared his throat gently. Sir, we're approaching the Brooklyn Bridge. Still want to go to the original address? I looked out at the city lights reflecting off dark water, then back at my phone showing the route to Montclair, still available in my GPS. Safety lay ahead in Brooklyn, but confrontation waited behind in New Jersey. For the first time in my life, I had to choose between protecting myself and protecting what remained of my family. Brooklyn's familiar skyline beckoned through the Uber's windshield, promising safety in the comfort of my worn armchair, where Margaret's memory lived in every thread. But safety felt like cowardice now, knowing what Rick was capable of doing to others. When desperation struck again, I pulled Margaret's wedding photo from my wallet, edges soft from years of handling, her smile as radiant as the day we'd promised to build something meaningful together. She wouldn't run, I whispered to her image. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. Everything all right back there, sir? Actually, no. I straightened in my seat, decision crystallizing like steel in my chest. I need to make a phone call. Then we're changing destination. My fingers shook as I dialed 911. 2 rings, then a professional voice. Emergency services. What's your emergency? My family is attempting to poison me for money. The words sounded surreal spoken aloud, like lines from a television drama. I have evidence and they're still at the location, with prepared legal documents. Sir, are you in immediate danger? Not right now, but I need officers at 247 Elmwood Drive, Montclair, New Jersey. I'm returning there to gather evidence. The dispatcher's questions came rapid fire. Nature of poisoning, number of suspects, weapons present. I answered methodically, my business training taking over. Clear facts, specific details, actionable information. Officers are en route. Estimated arrival 20 minutes. Sir, I strongly advise you not to return to that location until I understand the risk. Margaret's photo stared up at me, her eyes holding that expression she wore when I needed to be braver than I felt. But if I don't go back, they'll destroy evidence and try this again with someone else. After disconnecting, I leaned forward toward the driver. Change of plans. We're going back to Montclair. Sir, you seem really upset. Maybe you should think about this. This isn't a rash decision. I met his eyes in the mirror. Sometimes you have to choose between being safe and doing what's right. The return journey felt different from our earlier drive. Streetlights illuminated determination instead of confusion, purpose instead of hurt. Each mile brought me closer to confronting the son I'd raised, the family I'd trusted, the future I'd have to rebuild from scratch. Margaret's voice seemed to whisper from the photograph. Family means telling the truth even when it hurts. 20 minutes later, we turned onto Hill Street. Police cars approached from the opposite direction. Lights off, but unmistakably official. My heart hammered against my ribs as I realized this was really happening. I was about to destroy my family, to save myself and possibly others. Wait around the corner, I told the driver. This might take a while. Walking up the curved driveway felt like approaching an execution. The mansion's perfect exterior concealed such calculated evil, such desperate betrayal. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorbell. Time to face my son. The doorbell's chimes echoed through the mansion like a death knell. Footsteps approached quickly, too quickly for casual concern. Rick yanked the door open, relief and suspicion warring across his features. Dad, where have you been? His smile looked painted on. We were getting worried sick. Sorry, son. I forced my voice into apologetic tones. I needed some fresh air. Felt dizzy after all that rich food. Dizzy? His eyes sharpened. You were gone for almost half an hour. Emma thought something terrible had happened. Time got away from me. Beautiful neighborhood you have here. I walked further than intended. Emma appeared behind Rick, her designer dress wrinkled from nervous pacing. Her perfect hostess mask slipped for just a moment, revealing raw panic underneath. Jonathan, you gave us such a scare. She reached for my arm, with fingers that trembled slightly. Are you feeling better now? Much better, thank you. I allowed her to guide me back inside, noting how her grip lingered too long, too tight. Just needed to clear my head. The foyer felt smaller now, oppressive rather than impressive. Every expensive detail reminded me of the blood money that had purchased this illusion of success. Perhaps you had too much wine with dinner? Emma's laugh sounded brittle. Let's get you some water. And actually, I think I'd like to sit down again. I moved deliberately toward the dining room. If that's all right. Rick and Emma exchanged a glance laden with meaning I was supposed to miss. Their coordinated response felt rehearsed, like actors who'd forgotten their lines. Of course, Dad, whatever you need. The dining room had been hastily reorganized during my absence. Papers that might have been scattered across the table were nowhere to be seen. Maria moved efficiently between kitchen and dining room, her nervous energy more pronounced than before. I settled back into my chair at the head of the table, noting how Rick and Emma flanked me exactly as before. The crystal glasses had been cleared, the dinner plates stacked, but the atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension. I hope you don't mind, Emma said carefully, but we cleaned up a bit. Didn't want to leave Maria with too much work. Very considerate, I smiled blandly, wondering what evidence they'd hidden while I was gone. Rick drummed his fingers against the mahogany table, a nervous habit from childhood that betrayed his anxiety now. So, Dad, feeling completely recovered? No more dizziness or confusion? The question carried undertones I pretended not to hear. Clear as a bell, son. That fresh air worked wonders. Emma leaned forward with calculated concern. You know, rich meals can affect people differently as we get older. Perhaps next time we should plan something lighter. Next time. As if there would be one after tonight. I've always had a strong constitution, I replied evenly. Takes more than good food and wine to slow me down. Maria appeared with fresh water glasses, her movements sharp and efficient. When she placed mine before me, her fingers brushed the table edge, in what might have been an accidental tremor. Rick checked his watch, a gesture so subtle I almost missed it. Whatever timeline they were working against was growing shorter. Well, he said with forced brightness, since you're feeling better, maybe we could continue our evening. I know Emma was looking forward to more conversation. Absolutely. Emma's smile could have powered the chandelier. We have so much catching up to do, but something had shifted during my absence. Their desperation was showing through the cracks in their performance, and I could sense the evening building toward a crescendo. Rick stood suddenly and moved toward the liquor cabinet. Dad, let's have one more toast before the evening ends. Rick's hands trembled almost imperceptibly as he measured whiskey into fresh crystal tumblers. I watched him work, noting how he lingered over my glass, adding extra liquid that caught the light differently than the amber spirits. You know, I began casually, I want to tell you about the day you were born, Rick. His shoulders tensed slightly. Dad, that's sweet, but maybe we should toast first. This whiskey is too good to let it get warm. This is important, son. I settled back in my chair, hands folded peacefully. Your mother was in labor for 14 hours, longest day of my life. Emma leaned forward with forced enthusiasm. Jonathan, the whiskey will lose its flavor if we wait too long. Can't we drink and listen at the same time? Patience, dear. Some stories can't be rushed. I watched Rick carry the glasses toward our table, noting the slight sediment swirling in mine, when it caught the chandelier light. Where was I? Oh yes, Margaret was convinced. Something was wrong because labor was taking so long. Rick set my glass down carefully, ensuring I could see the generous portion he'd poured. His own glass contained significantly less, crystal clear, without any unusual particles. The doctor kept assuring us everything was normal, I continued, lifting my glass as if to examine the whiskey's color. But your mother had instincts about these things. She always knew when something wasn't quite right. Fascinating, Emma interrupted, her smile growing strained. But surely that toast is getting warm. Family stories are so much better with good whiskey. I swirled my glass gently, watching foreign particles dance in the amber liquid. Zetrulum, according to my anonymous caller, enough to make me compliant, suggestible, vulnerable to signing away everything. Margaret and I had built together. You're absolutely right about savoring good whiskey, I agreed, bringing the glass closer to my lips without drinking. Margaret always said patience makes everything taste better. Rick's eye twitched. Dad, you've been talking for 10 minutes. The whiskey really is getting warm. Time flies when you're sharing memories. I gestured expansively with my glass, using the motion to avoid actually drinking. Did I mention how tiny you were? Just 6 pounds, but you had the strongest grip I'd ever felt. Emma stood abruptly and moved behind my chair, her hands settling on my shoulders with practiced intimacy. Jonathan, you're such a wonderful storyteller. Why don't we toast to Rick's birth? Then you can continue. Her fingers pressed against my shoulders with increasing insistence. I could feel her desperation through her touch. The plan was falling apart, and they knew it. Your mother said you'd be stubborn from day one, I continued, pretending not to notice Emma's pressure. She was right, wasn't she? Once you set your mind on something, Nothing could stop you. Rick's composure cracked slightly. Dad, please, just one sip, then tell us about Mom. The thing about stubbornness, I mused, still holding my untouched glass, is that it can be a virtue or a vice. Margaret always worried about which way you'd choose. The room fell silent, except for the soft clink of Maria washing dishes in the kitchen. Rick and Emma stared at me with barely concealed frustration, their perfect plan unraveling with each passing minute. I think, I said slowly, Margaret would be heartbroken to see what choices you've made. Rick's face went white. What do you mean by that? Before I could answer, 3 sharp knocks echoed from the front door. Authoritative, unmistakable. Police, open the door. Rick's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor, as his face drained of all color. The metallic click of handcuffs cut through the dining room's stunned silence, like a judge's gavel. Rick stood frozen, his face the color of old parchment. As the senior officer stepped forward with practiced authority, Richard Miller, you're under arrest for attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse. The officer's voice carried the weight of years, spent dealing with family betrayals. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane. Rick's voice cracked like a teenager's. Officer, this is just a misunderstanding. My father is confused. Dad, please. Emma's hysteria built like a kettle reaching boil. Tell them this is all some terrible mistake. I stood slowly, the untouched glass of poisoned whiskey still in my hand. The sediment swirled like guilty secrets in amber liquid. There's no mistake. This glass contains zetrolum. My son added it to make me sign business transfer documents. The junior officer accepted the glass with latex gloves, holding it up to the chandelier light. The foreign particles were clearly visible, undeniable evidence of calculated betrayal. Sir, attempted poisoning carries 8 to 12 years minimum sentence, the senior officer informed Rick, as the handcuffs clicked into place. Conspiracy and elder abuse add additional time. Rick's knees buckled slightly. 12 years, but the loan sharks? They'll kill me if I don't pay in 11 days. Emma's face drained of color. Rick, shut up. Don't say anything else. But Rick was beyond strategic thinking. Dad, you don't understand. They threatened to break my legs, then kill me. I had no choice. You had choices, I replied quietly. You chose gambling over family. You chose crime over honest work. You chose to poison your own father, rather than face consequences. The officers exchanged glances. They'd heard desperate justifications before, but attempted patricide for gambling debts, registered as particularly disturbing. Emma Miller, the junior officer announced, you're also under arrest as a co-conspirator. No. Emma's perfectly manicured fingernails clawed at the table edge. I didn't plan anything. Rick forced me to help. I'm a victim too. The senior officer's expression suggested he'd heard that defense many times. Ma'am, evidence shows you researched the victim's preferences and participated in the drugging plan. As they led Rick and Emma toward the front door, Rick turned back with eyes that held one last desperate manipulation attempt. Dad, how could you do this to your own family? Mom would be heartbroken. Your mother valued honesty above comfort, I answered firmly. She would never forgive what you tried to do tonight. Maria appeared from the kitchen, her professional mask finally slipping, to reveal satisfaction mixed with sadness. She'd witnessed justice served, but understood the human cost. The mansion fell silent, except for the distant sound of car doors slamming and engines starting. Blue and red lights painted the expensive walls, in colors of consequence, as the police vehicles disappeared into the night. Standing alone in the dining room, where my family had tried to destroy me, I felt Margaret's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. She would have made the same choice. The expensive crystal lay shattered on marble floors, the poisoned whiskey spreading like spilled blood, evidence of how close I'd come to losing everything I'd worked to build. My phone buzzed with a text from the senior officer. Station processing will take 2 to 3 hours. We'll need your formal statement. Time to complete what I'd started. Time to ensure justice was properly served. The Montclair police station buzzed with late evening activity, drunk driving arrests, domestic disturbances, and now my family's conspiracy case. Rick and Emma sat in separate holding cells, their designer clothes looking absurd against institutional gray walls. Through reinforced glass, I watched Rick pace his cell like a caged animal. Every few minutes he'd glance toward where I sat, giving my statement, his expressions cycling between fury and desperate pleading. Mr. Miller, Detective Harrison set down his coffee. With deliberate precision. Walk me through the zetrolum again. How did you know what to look for? Anonymous tip, I replied honestly. Someone called warning me about the plan. They knew specific details about the drug and its effects. Any idea who this person might be? I thought about Maria's nervous efficiency during dinner, her careful positioning to observe without seeming to watch. No idea, but whoever it was saved my life. Emma's sobs echoed from the women's holding area. Through the station's chaos, her hysteria stood out like a siren. "This is all Rick's fault," her voice carried. "I just went along because I was scared." Detective Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Fear doesn't typically excuse conspiracy to commit elder abuse and fraud. We found the prepared legal documents in Mr. Rick's office. Power of attorney, business transfers, the whole package. How long will they serve? Attempted poisoning alone? 8 to 12 years. Add conspiracy, elder abuse, and fraud. Rick's looking at 15 to 20. Emma might get less if she cooperates, but she's still facing serious time." The numbers felt surreal. My son would spend his 40s in prison because he couldn't accept responsibility for his gambling addiction. "The loan sharks he mentioned," Detective Harrison continued. "We'll need details about those threats. Might help explain his desperation, though it won't excuse attempted murder." Through the window, I could see Rick, slumped on his cell's narrow bench, head in his hands. 20 years of my life raising him, teaching him right from wrong, building a legacy he could inherit, all destroyed by his inability to face consequences like an adult. "Dad," his voice suddenly boomed through the station as he spotted me through the glass. "Please, I'll pay it all back. I'll go to treatment. I'll change." The same promises he'd made during our last argument about money. The same manipulation that had worked when he was younger, and I was more naive about enabling destructive behavior. "Mr. Miller," Detective Harrison observed my son's outburst. "He's going to keep trying to manipulate you. Standard pattern with family financial crimes. I know. His mother always said I was too soft with him. Maybe if I had been stronger earlier." "Not your fault, sir. Adult children make their own choices." Emma appeared at her cell window. Makeup streaked down her cheeks like war paint. "Jonathan, please talk to them. Tell them I was coerced. I never wanted to hurt you." Her desperation felt familiar. The same tone Rick had used when caught in childhood lies. Neither of them accepted responsibility. Both blamed circumstances beyond their control. "Detective, I need to ask you something important." I leaned forward, decision crystallizing. "The anonymous person who warned me, they risked everything to save a stranger. If I knew who they were, I'd want to help them." "Understood. If they come forward, we'll make sure their cooperation is noted." The station's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that revealed truth without flattery. My family's perfect facade had crumbled completely, exposing the desperate criminality underneath. 3 hours later, paperwork complete, and formal statements recorded, I stood in the station lobby. The officer approached with car keys. "Ready to go home, Mr. Miller? We'll drive you back to Brooklyn." I pulled out my phone, staring at the number that had saved my life. Actually, I need to make one call first, to thank someone who deserves to know how this ended. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered, no longer disguised by fear, but warm with genuine concern. "This is Maria Gonzalez. How are you, Mr. Miller?" "Maria!" Relief flooded through me like warm sunlight. "You were right there the whole time. You saw everything and still found the courage to save me. I couldn't let them hurt you. You treated me with kindness, when your son and his wife treated me like furniture." Sitting in the police station lobby at nearly midnight, I found myself crying, for the first time since Margaret's funeral. Not from pain, but from overwhelming gratitude for this woman's moral courage. "Maria, how did you know about the Zetrulum? The documents, all of it?" 3 days ago, I was cleaning Mr. Rick's office when I heard them planning. They spoke as if I wasn't human, like I couldn't understand English, or wouldn't matter if I did. The casual cruelty struck me harder than the attempted poisoning. My son had become someone who dismissed human dignity based on job titles and immigration status. They discussed everything: the drug, how much to use, where to hide the papers. Miss Emma researched your favorite foods, your business routines, everything needed to manipulate you. You risked your job, possibly deportation, to warn a stranger. Not a stranger, her voice softened. A good man who reminded me of my father. Someone who said please and thank you, and actually looked at me when speaking. The police officer gestured that my ride was ready, but this conversation mattered more than convenience. "Maria, I need to ask you something important. Do you have another job lined up?" "No, sir. After tonight, I doubt I'll get references from the Millers. I own 7 restaurants in Brooklyn. I need a manager for my newest location. Someone I can trust completely. Someone with your moral character and judgment." Silence stretched across the phone connection. When Maria spoke again, her voice trembled with emotion. "Mr. Miller, you don't have to. This isn't charity. I need employees who do the right thing when no one's watching. You proved tonight that you're exactly that person. The salary would be $60,000 to start. Health benefits, profit sharing after 1 year, plus all the job training you need to advance in restaurant management." Maria's sob was audible through the phone. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll start Monday morning, 10 a.m., at the Crown Heights location. I'll be there to personally train you." The police officer waited patiently while I completed arrangements with Maria. Address exchange, start date confirmation, promise of work, visa assistance if needed. When I finally hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. The ride back to Brooklyn passed in comfortable silence. Streetlights illuminated familiar neighborhoods where honesty still mattered more than wealth, where people worked hard, without expecting others to fund their mistakes. My modest house welcomed me like an old friend. Inside, family photos covered the refrigerator. Rick at various ages, Emma at their wedding, Margaret smiling from better times. I removed Rick's photo carefully, not destroying it, but placing it in a kitchen drawer. Some memories deserved preservation, but not daily visibility. Emma's wedding picture followed. Margaret's photo remained on the refrigerator, her smile approving of justice served, and new friendships earned through moral courage. On my calendar I wrote, Maria, 10:00 a.m., Monday, in the space reserved for important appointments. Below that, new beginning. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with honest late-night activity. Night shift workers heading home, early shift workers starting their day, people who understood that integrity couldn't be purchased with borrowed money or stolen through family manipulation. Margaret would have loved Maria's story. She always said, the best employees were those who did right things, for right reasons, regardless of personal cost. My phone buzzed with a final text from Detective Harrison. Both suspects formally charged. Trials scheduled for August. Your testimony will be crucial. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, finally ready to sleep peacefully. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, justice had been served, by good people making difficult choices. In my bedroom, Margaret's cologne still sat on the dresser, a reminder that love means protecting people from harm, even when that harm comes from family, especially when it comes from family. If you like this story, please like this video, and subscribe to the channel for more unbelievable family stories. And don't miss what comes next. If this story broke your heart the way it broke mine, let me know in the comments.